Hello, can everybody hear me? Let me know if you can't hear me. And then we'll get started. Lots to do today, lots to do. All right. Okay. So let me know if you can hear me. If you can't hear me, then we got a problem. All right. All right, Jimbo says he hears me. Cool. All right, so we last left off here. We built this and it looks sick, right? It looks pretty damn good. We built this in like half an hour. Thanks to Victoria for having the Figma already, so it's good about that. But now we want to move up to the sign up, right? So we want to build a sign up screen. So again, these are completely separate things right here, okay? These are completely separate screens. Now remember what we went over the last time when we talk about screens. So screens are supposed to be something that basically is the main focus of your application. So in Android, we call these activities. In iOS, we call these screens. In Unity, we call them scenes. In web technologies, like websites, usually call it a page. Since we're building, the social media application, it's a web app, we're gonna call it a screen, but call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter. The idea is always going to be the same. You have this thing, okay, this part of your application that is like the main focus. Okay, we usually just call this a screen, so that's what I refer to it. It's just a screen. So these two screens, although they look very similar, they're completely different. Okay, these are completely different. So if I were to go to, let's say, /login, that takes me here. And if I were to go to /signup, it takes me here. Now, you could create something kind of like a user, I guess you call it like experience, where you can go from here to here in the same screen, right? You could totally do that. You could animate this to kind of like go away like that, and then this comes in like that or whatever. There's like the options are endless. Okay, the way we're going to build ours is we're going to separate them out. We're going to separate them out for now. Maybe we'll add some animation using, React Spring or something like that. But for now, we're going to have them completely separate, so they're completely separate entities. Okay. So our task for today is to basically build this. Now, the really cool thing is that we kind of already have something that looks very similar, right? So we can kind of like look at our old code and kind of go from there, because a lot of the stuff looks the same. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna, I encourage you to use this, Victoria, if you can link it into if it's publicly available, link it in the in YouTube and the Discord. That way people can come and like look at it. But I'm gonna put this on a separate screen, so you're not gonna be able to see it. So basically, I encourage you to view it on your own screen. Okay. Okie dokies. All right, so I need a third monitor. Okay, cool. So we have. So far we have this login screen. Okay, that's great. So now we just need to build a sign up, right? We want to have a sign up now. So here on the screen, I'm going to create another one called signup.jsx. Okay, so under screens, I'm creating a whole new one, signup.jsx. Okay, so now we just do the same thing. We always import it. Import everything as React from React. Okay, that's bare bones right there. And now we're going to create our component. Now again, there's multiple ways. One way is to create a function like this, and then we do export default login like that. The other option, which is the one I kind of prefer, is you create your function into a variable. So we say const sign up is equal to, okay, and we use a lambda function like that, an arrow function like so. And then from here we just return, just like this other function. Remember, the return, you're going to return your JSX. That's what this is. Okay, you always, every component must return something to draw. And the drawing is going to be the instruction set up as JSX. So here we can just do a simple div. We'll just put, for now, sign up. And that's it. That's all we're doing. However, again, just like in the last session, I said, even if you create a component, because we're using these import statements, these files here are actually called modules. So by default, everything inside of a module is basically private. It's like encapsulated, okay? Nobody else can access these functions or code or whatever from outside of this file. So we must explicitly export them using something like this. Okay, we need to export it to the outside world. So here I created a variable. This is a variable, right? Const sign up. This is a variable, but I'm using a capital S to distinguish, like, hey, this is a component, treat it like a component. This variable just happens to be assigned a function. So in order to export this, we just do export default sign up, okay? And that's it. Now we have access to it in the outside world, so we can import it from a different component. So Jim's asking, are all of our components going to be functional? Or are we going to be making classes too? For the most part, they're going to be functions. I will go over classes when we do something called model view controller, or MVC for short. And I'll show you the different ways we can achieve MVC from a class perspective and a functional one. And we'll achieve the same MVC structure with components using something called composition, which is a very advanced technique. But I'm going to show you because, why not? Okay, so now we have our sign up component set up here. So now we just got to import it somewhere. So in our app.js file here, so currently we're drawing the login. So let's comment this out, hit save. Okay, now it's gone. Okay, so let's bring in our sign up. We'll say import sign up from screens/sign up. There it is. Cool. Now we just render it using this JSX style. So there's my sign up component, and that's it. Hit save. Now it says sign up over here. That's the only thing that current component is doing. It just says sign up, right? It just says sign up. Okay, but that's boring, right? We need it to look like what we have in Figma. So hopefully you guys have Figma open. I don't see anybody else looking at it, so that's not a good sign. So yeah, just have Figma open and just start looking at what we're going to build. Okay, cool. So now we just have to basically do what we did before, right? So we have this div right here. Okay, we have this div, and this div is going to contain basically everything that we're going to draw. Now, just like before, we had said that this div, because it's supposed to be a screen, it's supposed to be allowed to take up the entire screen. Because remember, divs by default, okay, if we look at how this div is being drawn, let me push this to the side. If we click here, we can see here's the div, right? And look at this. It's taking up the entire width, but it's not taking up the entire height. Okay, that's a problem. We want this div to take up the entire screen. Because by default, divs are block types. And because they're block types, they only ever extend the width of the parent, and the height is going to be dependent upon how many children you have and their height. So it's always going to be the minimum height of the sum of the children's heights. Okay, that's why here, if we look here, the div is only as large as the height of this text. If I were to make this text bigger or smaller, the div will expand in order to encompass all of the children. Okay, but we don't want to do that. We want this div to expand. So one way we can do this is in Tailwind. We can say class name right here is equal to, and then we can just change the width to be screen, and then the height to be screen. Okay, so everything looks the same. However, now if we hover over this div right here that has the sign up, you'll notice now the entire thing is blue. So the entire thing now is blue. So we just took up the entire screen. Okay, so that's the biggest difference. Okay, cool. So this background for here had this slight background color, this different background color. So right now we're just going to copy it, and we're going to put it into our sign up. So we're going to do something like this. So the div, right, remember all the HTML elements have a style attribute. Okay, this is a style attribute. Let me make this bigger like that. So every HTML element has a style attribute. So we can change these style attributes directly inline like this, because it's called inline styling. Okay, and we're going to basically, this is hard coding the background color for this div. So we're going to hit save. Now you can see that the background color is slightly off-white. It's an off-white now. Okay. Now, I hope that by you seeing this background color hard-coded, that you're seeing a problem here, because I'm using the word hard-coded. So we're going to address this problem later. We don't want to hard code any colors if possible. Okay, so now we need to build the sign up page. So in order to do that, we need to have another div, because this div needs to have a background color of white. So we're going to say, you're going to use Tailwind class name BG white. So the background color is going to be white. Okay. And right now you don't see anything. Now why is that? Why don't we see anything? Well, here it is. Here's our div, which is this div right here. But you'll notice it's empty. So see how the height right there is 0? If you look at this area right here, you're going to see that the height is 0. Okay? That's to be expected, because remember I said block elements will always take up the entire width of its parent, but its height is always going to be dependent on its children. Since this div has no children, its height is 0. There's nothing to calculate. But if we type in something like, you know, sign up in here now we get something. And you'll notice that the color here is white, and it's taking up the entire width. Again, that's not what we want, because if we look at our design here, it's supposed to be like this square. Whoa, that's too far. It's supposed to be this little square, right? That takes up almost the entire page, but not all the way, right? So we don't want it to be the entire width. So what we ended up doing is we changed the size of this container to the maximum size that Tailwind supports out of the box, which is 96. Now these are in rems, so they'll scale based off the screen size. So if somebody, you know, scales up the screen in their settings because, you know, they want everything to look a little bit bigger or maybe a little bit smaller, these will scale accordingly. Okay, so now you see that by us setting the width and the height, now we have this white square, right? And so that's going to basically be our container. It's going to contain this, you know, this stuff, basically our sign up form. Okay, So now let's add the title. So we have a title here. So we do H1 and it says sign up for Bidder, which is our fake social media website. Now it says sign up for Bidder there. Like that. There we go. It says sign up for Bidder. Then we're going to add an input field. So here we're going to say type, this is text, and then placeholder. We're going to say this first part is email. So the type here is not going to be text, it's going to be email. Okay. If we hit save, we're going to see our little input field here. And now you'll notice that when I click now, it actually gives me some suggestions for the emails that I've already used. The browser kind of helps you out here. Just by me setting the type to email, when I click here, it's going to be like, hey, you want to use any of these other emails that you used before? Like, yeah, sure, I could do that. Right? So that's pretty cool. Right? So that's code that we don't have to write to have that logic. The browser will automatically do this for us as long as we set the type to email. Okay, cool. Now let's do another input field. It's going to be the username, so type. By default, it's going to be text. You don't have to explicitly state it, but I'm just letting you know that this is a text input type. Okay? Now you might be thinking, inputs, isn't input always text? No, right? Remember when we were doing the HTML segment like almost a month ago, there are different types of inputs, right? You can have radio buttons, checkboxes, date pickers, stuff like that. So the type's not always going to be text. So by default, it's going to be text, but you know, it's nice to be a little bit explicit here to say, yeah, this is going to be a text type. So the placeholder for this one is going to be username. If I hit save, now we're going to have email here and username. And again, you'll see that these guys are side by side. And again, we talked about this the last time. It's because input types are inline. Okay, they're inline. Or inline block, because we can actually change the height and it will respect it. If it was just inline and you try and change the height, it won't respect it. Okay. Next, we have the password. So input type, change, make sure this is set to password. This is a password type. Placeholder, password. Hit save. Okay, cool. Now, if here I go my password, I try and type something, you'll notice that you get those little dots. And I have this little cool icon that can show me the password of it I typed into this field. Very cool. Very cool. Okay. And then I have two buttons. Button. This first one is login. And then the second button is sign up. Okay, now we have our two buttons, login and sign up. Again, if you're not using Tailwind, you will have default styling. Because we're using Tailwind, all the default styles have been erased. They've been removed. So we have to provide all the styling now. So look at that. So we have our text, our title, sign up for a bidder, our email input, our username, our password, and then these two buttons, login and sign up. So we have all of our major components that we need for this section. Now we just got to add the styling. So let's start adding the styling. So the first part is that we have this title here. So we have this title here and it's to be bigger. So here we go, using Tailwind again, class name, text. We're going to do, I think it was 3XL. There you go. Okay, now it's all large. So let me just confirm. So if I go to my login, we used 3XL. Yes. Okay, cool. So there you go, 3XL. Nice. So it's nice and big now. What else? The inputs have a border. They have a green border. Again, refer to the Figma. Okay. The inputs all have this green border. So they all have the same styling. Okay, they all have the same styling. Now, I could change the styles of the inputs one at a time, but because I'm using VS Code, one of the really cool things you can do is use multi-cursors. This is something that I showed the last time. So let's talk about that again. So if I click here on the input, doesn't matter where, well, as long as where you type is going to be valid. So I like to always start here, okay, at the end of one of the tag names. So there's input, hold Alt on your computer, on your keyboard, hold the Alt, and then click in any other location you want to add another cursor. So I want another cursor here. So there you go. Now I have two. You can see I have two blinking cursors. And then I want to add another one here. These three inputs are basically going to have the same style. So now I have three cursors. Okay, so now I can write the same code once, but in three different areas. That's pretty powerful. It's going to make you write your code a lot faster, especially if you're going to have to write the same code, or you're writing the same thing in multiple lines. Okay, you can edit multiple lines at the same time. So here I'm going to have class name, and then they're all going to have a border. Okay, so if I hit save now, you're going to see that they all have this border. You see they all have a border now. But on Figma, the border was green. So let's do border green 500. Again, this isn't the correct green, but for right now, we're hard coding a color just so we can see. So there you go. Now the border is green. The other thing is we need some spacing. So we can add some spacing inside of the content by using something called padding. So remember, the difference between padding and margins is margins pushes neighboring elements away, right, from itself, versus padding is going to squish the contents it has. Okay. Now by default, when you add the padding and stuff like that, it's actually going to make the element actually bigger. Okay. At the same time, it moves the contents, so sometimes it gets a little bigger. So here we have px. I think 2 is nice to have. You're going to see that the placeholder text has now been moved, kind of nudged. And then if you look at the horizontal area, there's some spacing, but I don't think there's enough. So we're going to add a py1, so padding on both the top and the bottom. We're going to add a padding of a quarter rem. Okay, cool. That looks really nice. Okay. And the next thing is that we want the radius on to be circular. So instead of it being like square, the edges, when we talk about the radius, we're talking about the edges here. By default, there's like a slight, curve. It's kind of smooth. So you can do a couple of things. You can say rounded none. If you do rounded none, it's completely square, right? There is no smoothing of the edges. It's completely square. But in our Figma, right, our design that we have some roundedness. So if we say rounded, you're going to get these edges here that are rounded, okay? But the roundedness in Figma is pretty pronounced, so we're going to use rounded large. You can see that it gets even more rounded, right? So there we go. That looks pretty nice. Okay, and for now, that's pretty good. Now the buttons, we need to customize these as well. So the buttons are round. Okay, so let's fix that. And we also want to add some padding on the top and the bottom. So again, since a lot of these styles are going to be relatively the same, I'm going to use my multi-cursors. So clicking on the button here to the right side of the tag, I will click Alt, hold Alt, and then click. Now I have two cursors. So class name. And now I'm going to type in, we'll add a px2, even though when we extend the button, you're really not going to see, but it's just good to know that there's supposed to be some padding there. And we're going to do a py of 1. Hit save. So you can see the buttons actually grew, right? There's a little bit of padding now. So the next thing we want to do is we want to make these rounded. Now, if you notice that on the Figma, they're incredibly rounded. This is what we call a pill. Okay, a pill. So this button's supposed to look like a pill. So to achieve that roundedness with Tailwind, you can say rounded and then full. So rounded full means, make this thing as round as possible. And so that's going to give us that pill form. Now again, you can't really tell here because the background color is basically doesn't exist. And then also, there's no border, right? Because one of them is supposed to have a border, the other one has a solid background. Okay, so let's fix this. So the login one has a border. So let's do a border. And the border is going to be that green color. Okay, hit save. There you go. Look at that login. See, we have a border now, and it's green. Okay, and notice that there's some spacing here along the x-axis, and we add some little bit more spacing along the y-axis. When we say y-axis, I mean top and bottom, and when I say x-axis, I mean the left and the right. Okay, so let's fix the text color. So in login, the text color has to be this green color too. So we're going to say text green 500. Okay, there you go. So now they are the same green. Now let's fix up sign up. So sign up has a solid background color. So to do that with Tailwind, we say BG for background and then give it a color. So green 500. And the text is going to be white. So we can say text white. Okay, there we go. Boom. Beautiful. I've barely done anything and this is already looking really nice. Now, again, this is the power of Tailwind. This is why I like it. This is why I'm showing you this, because I think this is fantastic, right? With very little effort, look how much we've been able to do, right? We're just using these utilities that are coming from Tailwind. It's beautiful, right? It's super great. With more practice, you'll be able to do this on your own websites, your own apps, whatever. Use Tailwind, and look what you can achieve very quickly, very fast. Okay, so all right, 6:26. I want to finish this by 7, so I can talk about the next part, which is the CSS variables and extending Tailwind. All right, so now we just got to fix the spacing here. So we talked about in the last session is recognizing the layouts of the elements now. So from now on, every time you look at a website, I want you to think, how is this laid out? Is this laid out using a grid? Is this laid out using vertical layout? Is it a horizontal layout? Like, what is this? Right? Those are your typical, layouts. You either have grid, vertical and horizontal layouts. And what we mean by vertical layouts is what you see here. It looks like the elements are stacked vertically, right? Vertically. So this right here is an example of something that is stacked horizontally because they're stacked from left to right, or horizontal. Think of this as an x-axis, so they're going horizontally. Versus all these other elements, they're being stacked vertically on top of each other, or on the y-axis. You can think of it that way. Now the cool thing is you can have different layouts within components, right? So here we have a vertical layout, and then one of its components here, one of its children, happens to be in a horizontal layout. So you can mix and match vertical and horizontal layouts. A really good example of this is Netflix. If you were to look at Netflix, you can actually scroll, right? You scroll and you see all the videos, but then you can also move the videos horizontally. They both have a vertical and a horizontal layout, right? So you can do it. All right. So how do we achieve this then? How do we achieve this, right? Well, the way I like to do this, okay, there's a couple of ways. So you'll remember in the last one, I introduced something called flex. Okay, flex. Now, what does flex do? Flex basically allows you to actually tell the HTML drawer how to stack your elements, the children. Okay, so if I were to say flex, by default, just like this, just say flex, I'm basically changing the display type. So right now the div is a block type. If I call it flex, I'm changing the display to flex type. So if I hit save, the default layout, the way children are laid out in a flex style is horizontally from left to right. But I can change this by saying flex and then saying flex column. Now we can change the direction. You see this? Flex direction is now going to be in columns. So we're going basically we're stacking things vertically. So if I hit save, you'll notice there's something different now, right? Now the elements take up the entire width and they're stacked like pancakes vertically, right? So now they're vertically stacked. So by just using these two utilities, all of the children now are going to be stacked vertically and they take up the entire width of the parent, right? The width of this div right here is 96 by 96 rems, okay? Does this all make sense? How we're stacking these things up? Okay. All right. Now, let's try and solve the problem with these buttons, because these buttons need to be stacked left to right. So how do we solve that problem? Well, the best way to solve this problem is actually to wrap them inside of another container. So these two buttons are going to be wrapped in its own container, and I will change that container's layout. So we're going to say div. So we create a new div. Remember, div stands for division. Okay, so this is a division of the content. I'm dividing the content up using this divider, and I'm going to put the content here. So this is the content. So if I hit save, you'll notice that this happens. Because remember, buttons are inline block, and their widths is just going to depend on the size, or yeah, the drawing size of its children. Right now we just have some text, and then we have some padding. So the widths of these buttons, they have no reason to extend themselves, right? They have literally no reason to extend themselves. Okay. Well, we can achieve this by saying class name flex. Okay. And now they're being stacked left to right. Okay. But again, well, actually we probably don't need to use flex here. What we can do is, since again the buttons are inline block, okay, inline block, their widths are just going to be dependent on its children. So one thing we can do is we can actually force the buttons to be like, hey, I want you to take up as much width as you can. So one way to achieve this is we can go here using our double cursors like that. We're going to say W for width. This is a Tailwind utility. And we're going to say full. We hit save now. We have this problem. Okay. So they're now extending. They're extending themselves. But the problem that we have now is that their widths are so large that they can't actually be stacked left to right anymore. They're getting forced to be stacked vertically. So we're back to our original problem. However, because we're inside of a container, I can force these elements to be stacked left to right by just calling flex. Now if I save that, now you'll notice that they're going to take up as much width as possible. However, this div is forcing these elements to be drawn left to right, regardless of their widths. Okay? So since this is full and this is full, this flex is going to basically have them both take up 50%, half and half. And now you'll notice that they're left to right and they're taking up as much space as possible, which means that if for some reason you disabled the sign up button, like you completely removed it, the login will take up the entire space. So you have to be careful, right? You might need to have a contingency plan if, you know, one of your buttons were to get disabled. For example, if it's conditionally rendered, what should be the fallback? Should the width of the button only be up to a certain amount or what, right? So there's some, you know, you're gonna have to think about that. For now, the login and sign up button we know will always exist. So this is okay to do. All right. So now that we have that, the next thing we want to do is we want to talk about spacing. Okay, these things are too crammed, right? So what would be nice is if we can put this all to be centered. So how can we center these? Well, since I used flex column, so the direction that everything is getting drawn is in a column structure, so vertically. If I will have to use something called justify center. If I save now, you'll notice that everything gets vertically aligned. If I were to use the default direction, which is row, then if you want to center things vertically, you have to use something called items center. But since here everything's getting drawn vertically, we use justify center. So if it was flex row, or by default the flex direction is always going to be in a row, then justify center will justify things horizontally, not vertically. So you do the opposite. So if I wanted to vertically align things that were flexed, you would say items center. But since we're using the direction has changed to a column direction, then we cannot use item center. We have to use justify center. Okay. So now we want to add some spacing. Okay. So let's try and add some spacing with these buttons, because if we look at the Figma here, if we look at the Figma here, there's some spacing here. So how do we add some spacing between these two buttons? So one thing we can do is add a margin. We can do that using a utility called SpaceX. Not SpaceX, the spaceship company. SpaceX, as in add a space horizontally, and then you give it a number. So 0, if you use 0, well, nothing changes. It's 0. But if we say, let's say 1, hit save, boom, there's that little bit of space. Okay, now these are in rems. Again, these are in rems. So you have to be careful. So here we're at 2. This is in, there you go, a little bit more. So I think SpaceX 3 is a good one. Yeah, so that looks pretty close to the Figma. Okay, cool. Not too bad, not too bad, not too bad. So the next thing is that we need to add some spacing on either side, right? It's too crammed. Like, it's not supposed to extend to the edges. We don't want it to be edges. We have the spacing that we need to have, right? It's part of our design. So how do we do that? Well, if we go to the parent container here, the one that's this white container here, we can add the spacing here. So the way we do that is using padding. Whenever you want to squish the contents in, you want padding. So here we're going to say px, so padding along the left and the right side. Let's start off with something pretty generous, like 10. px 10. We're squishing things in. Look at that, squishing it in. Now I forget exactly the padding that we used the last time, so I'll just refer back to the previous one. We added a padding of 16, so really tight. So 16. There we go. Nice and snug. There we go. Look at that. Okay. Now we need to add some spacing vertically. See, here we added spacing horizontally using SpaceX. So you can imagine if we wanted to add spacing between elements that are stacked on top of each other, we would use space Y. So at you add the spacing generally on the containers that contain the elements, your children. So we want to add spacing between these elements. So I got to find the container. There's the container. So I say space Y, and then let's start off with like 5. There you go. Look at that. You got some breathing room. It's not so claustrophobic now, right? Look, you got some spacing now. But the spacing, however, does not reflect the same kind of spacing that we have here. The design is slightly different. Look at the design here. We have this text here that has all the spacing right here. We have all this white space, and then there's some white space here. And to me, it looks like this white space and this white space is the same. But the spacing between these elements here is different. So what does that tell you? This tells you that these elements here, these input elements, should be in its own container in order for us to be able to achieve something like that. So let's do it without the containers, and let's see the problem. So Jim's asking, what's the difference between SpaceX and PX? SpaceX adds a margin. Remember what margins are. Margins adds spacing between elements, right? It pushes elements away, versus padding adds spacing within itself, within its contents. So padding is like when you add extra layers of clothes, you add extra padding, right? You yourself become bigger, right? Margins would be like you extend your arm outward or something like that, and you push other people away from you. You're adding distance between things, versus padding is you're making yourself kind of bigger, right? Basically, you're adding spacing between your own contents. So again, let me bring up my super expensive drawing tool here, and let's go over margins again. So here's element 1, and then here's element 2. So we have 2 elements here, and we have some text here like this, and then maybe we have some buttons here. Okay, there's my buttons. Now, if I add a margin, so a margin is the space between elements. So this is, E1 for element 1. This is E2. So if I want to add a margin is this right here, the spacing between elements. So if I increase the margin, let's say on this person, this element, E1, if I say E1, I want to change your margin, okay? Your margin, will we say right? Okay, so this is what the attribute looks like, margin right. So basically, I'm saying everything to the right of this element, I want you to be a distance of, and then you can say something like, let's say 6 pixels, right? We need to, isn't that the CDC recommendation, right? You got to be 6 feet away. Well, let's say that our recommendation for social distancing of our elements is 6 pixels. So this, we need to, basically we're saying everything to the right of E1 element must be 6 pixels, right? So you can, pretend that this is 6 pixels. So now this is 6 pixels. Okay, so Alex says margins equals social distancing, padding equals pillow armor. Beautiful. Exactly, that's exactly it. So you'll notice that in E1 is like very tight. You'll notice that the contents are all the way to the edge, right? So we wouldn't add margins. What you would do is you would add padding. So padding is going to be, me taking this and then moving it, right? Moving it, right? See the difference? See the difference? Right? So margins is between elements, right? Like Alex says, social distancing. This is margins right here. This is margins. So margin is that right there. Boom. This. The distance between elements, or social distancing. And then padding is this. This is our padding. This is padding. This, the space between the elements here, the contents, and its parent container. Okay, this is the parent. The parent container. Again, I'm writing this with a mouse, so don't scream at me. So this is the parent container, and this right here is the contents. The contents. This is the contents. This right here is the padding. I really need to get a pencil to draw. Yeah, this is padding, and then this is margins. Do you see the difference? So the margins is space between elements, and then padding is the distance away from your containers. Okay. So you can think of this as like some extra squish, right? Some extra squishiness right here, right? Extra squishiness. This is your padding, right? The distance from the edge of your container, and the margin is like pushing things away. So what does space X do? Space X adds margins to the right of elements. if I remember correctly. So space X adds margins to, I think actually we can actually check here. If you hover over space X, it actually tells you the CSS. So where's the space X? Hover over here. Why is my thing not hovering? My computer's on fire right now. SpaceX doesn't want to show. Okay. I promise you that's what SpaceX is doing. SpaceX is adding a margin, I believe, to the left of the second child. The second, or not the child, the second sibling. I'll show you what that means later. Just know that this works. It's a funky utility that was built into Tailwind. It's pretty gnarly the way it works. And then space Y is basically doing the exact same thing. Notice that when we increase this, let me do something crazy like space Y 10. You'll notice that, remember, these are contents, right? These are siblings. So the space Y is just margins. It's pushing things away from one another. Do you see that? It's pushing things away. Okay. So I'm actually pushing the elements away from each other. Versus if I go crazy with the padding, okay, the padding is basically saying, hey, I want you to get away from the edges. So padding is the distance from the edges, okay, distance from the edges. Versus margins, or what space X and space Y are, is distance between elements. It happens to be the case that if you use the Y, it's the distance from vertically, okay? And if you use X, it's the distance between one another. Okay, and that's basically the difference there. So padding is just the distance from the edges, and then margins is the distance between elements. Okay, cool. So this looks pretty good. So so we need a higher margin here. So there you go. This space here and this space looks correct. Right? This space actually looks correct here. The problem is that these elements here are too spaced out. They're way too spaced out. So that's why I said that in order for us to achieve this spacing here, these elements need to be contained together. So how do we achieve that? Well, just put these elements in their own container. So we create another division, another div, and we put these elements together. Okay, there's nothing wrong with doing this. Absolutely nothing wrong. Now if we do this, we hit save, boom. Okay. Now, we want to enforce the fact that these should be stacked on top of each other. So we're going to use a flex container. So we're going to say flex column to change the drawing direction to be vertical. So again, you see no change. Okay, you see no change. But we're basically here, we're being explicit. Hey, I want all these elements to be stacked on top of each other. Okay. That's basically it. That's all we're doing. By saying flex column, you're just saying draw these things vertically. If I just say flex, it's going to draw them horizontally, which is absolutely what we don't want. So we've got to say flex column. There we go. Now here I can add a margin using space Y because I need the distance between the elements to have some space. So we'll start off with space Y2. Now you'll notice the distance, right, the spacing between these siblings is a little bit more. So now we have some spacing. So we'll do like, let's say space Y4 or something like that. I don't know. So in the previous one, we used what? Space Y5. So we use space Y5. There we go. Got some nice spacing, right? And you'll notice that the spacing here is different than the spacing here. We've been able to achieve this because these elements are in their own container, and so I can change the spacing there independently. So that's pretty cool. You got to be smart about how you lay out your elements and how you use divs. Don't just blindly use divs everywhere. Use divs where they make sense. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, now we have one last thing to do. We look at our Figma. This is supposed to be drawn in the center of the screen, just like before. However, we can't achieve that currently, right? Because if we look at here, it's being drawn on the top left-hand corner. So how do we fix that? Well, what we can do is we can do what we did in the previous one, which was we create a container in order to have this content be vertically aligned. Now, you can achieve that by changing this container. However, I would strongly urge not to do that, because in the future, if you want to add something else to this screen, you might shoot yourself in the foot if you do that. Okay, so you actually want to build another container. So we build another division. Okay, and this is going to basically be, whoops. Okay, I don't want to do that. Let me, there we go. So this is going to be a wrapper to center the contents to the middle of the screen. Okay. All right. Because one thing we can do is we can center this thing horizontally. We can actually achieve that in right here on this container level. We can tell this container to center itself horizontally. So how do we do that? We can do that using MX, margins. Remember, by using the margins, I'm saying I want it to have spacing on the left and the right. Okay, on the left and the right. Not padding, but spacing. If I say auto, it's going to basically put an even amount of spacing on the left and the right. If I do this, I get it to align horizontally. I get to align it horizontally. But I can't do this vertically. That's a problem. So in order to fix this, you need another container. Now we're going to grab this container and pull it up here. So now all of this white container is now inside of another container. That's going to be our wrapper. It's going to help us center it. Now, the problem here is that this container, you'll notice that the height of this container takes up whatever height is of its children. This defeats the purpose, because now how do you vertically align this? Well, you can't, right? Because you need the container to take up the entire screen, because then you can actually calculate what the center is. Here we can't do that yet. So we got to tell this div, this wrapper, it's like, hey, I need you to take up the entire width and the entire height. Okay, you see no difference. However, if we click here and we look at the container now, you'll notice that the container now takes up the entire width and the height. So before it was taking up the entire width, but not the height, but now we are. So how can we align the content here? Well, it's the same way that we aligned this content vertically. How do we achieve that? By using flex call, justify center. So we're going to make this a flex container. Okay. But if I do that, it's going to go left to right. That's not what we want. So we say flex column. I want the content in here to be vertically aligned. Again, you still see no difference. But now I want to be like, okay, I want to justify center. That's going to vertically align it, because the only reason why this works is because this div knows the entire height of the screen, because its height is set to full. And this h full, this height 100%, is based off its parent. Well, who's the immediate parent of this div? Well, it's this div, which happens to have the height of the entire screen. Therefore, I'm able to achieve this effect. So now I have the content vertically aligned using margins, or have it horizontally aligned using margins, and then I have it vertically aligned using flex. Now, do you have to use margins in order to achieve this effect? No. If I remove this MX auto from here, it's going to be vertically aligned, but not horizontally aligned. To align this thing horizontally, I then have to say items center. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, never mind. Okay, we're gonna need auto. I forget there's a trick so you don't have to do what I just did, but I forget how to do it, and I think this is the better way. Okay. All right, forget I said anything. Okay, cool. So now we're horizontally aligned using the MX auto. And then we're vertically aligned because our container is flexed and we have justify center. Boom. Now this matches the screen. See, login had to be centered. Now we have this to be centered. Okay. Now we're only missing one last thing that we're missing here is that this container needs to have these rounded edges and it has a shadow. It has a shadow effect. How do we achieve this? Okay, if you notice that our edges right now are sharp. Divs by default are sharp edges. So how do we fix that? Well, here's the div that has a background of white. So this is the one. So we're going to say rounded. I think large is what we used before. So we get these nice curved rounded edges. So they're no longer sharp. So, okay, so you can't cut your finger there, right? They're nice and soft. Okay. I think we used large. I don't remember. We might have gone a little bit heavy on the roundedness. Yeah, we went 2XL. Because I'm looking at it and I don't think it's round enough based off Figma. There we go. So now it's even more round. Look at that. Looks nice. Nice and smooth. Very good. Now we need to add a shadow effect. How do we do that? Well, again, Tailwind has the shadow utility. Shadow. You do the shadow. You're going to notice that the edge now has a slight shadow, but we need it to be more feathered. We need a bigger shadow. So I think we used shadow large. And you can see how the shadow extends a little further. The height is a little bit more. Now you can totally tell there's a shadow. And because of the shadow, it actually looks like this component here is actually coming off the screen. Gives it that three-dimensional effect. Very nice, very clean. Yeah, so we use a shadow large on this one. Very beautiful. Look at that. Come on. That looks sick. Doesn't it look sick? And it took us only like half an hour to basically build that. A little bit less. A little bit more. I'm talking. Beautiful, right? That looks sick. Put that on your resume, right? In your portfolio. Hey, look what I can do. Shit, that looks sick. But look how little effort we really have to put in. We just got to think about things a little bit, right? Like, how should these things be aligned? You know, what kind of spacing am I looking at? I'm looking at padding, margins. What am I looking at? Right? And that's really it. It's not too much to it. Tailwind does a lot of things. Okay? So if you look at this and you're not impressed, I don't think you've done enough web development to understand like insanity that you can do this so quickly. Again, I'm talking. If I wasn't talking, you just gave me the design, I can hash out the entire design within an hour using Tailwind. Okay? I can literally speed run this. I can do this entire thing. Well, probably most of this, probably like an hour or two. Just using Tailwind. That's insane. Like that's like insane. Like freaking insane. And you can do that too. You just gotta practice. All right, we have this beautiful design now. Look at that. But there's still some problems here. Like for example, when I click on the email, you have this black border. Yuck. Okay. You don't want the black borders. It kind of destroys, you know, the colors that we have here, right? It doesn't match. So how do we fix that? We fix that by, again, going into the inputs. I'm going to use multi-cursors. Click here, click here. I'm going to say on focus, outline none. So when you focus it, you get no outline. So here it's focused. I brought it in focus because I clicked on it, but notice that there's no outline now. So if I hit tab, I move over to the next input field. If I hit tab, I go to that input field. If I hit tab, it goes to this button. Now the problem is that I have this black border, I have this border around there. I don't want the border. Okay, so how do I fix that? If you go here on the buttons, we do the same thing. Okay, so multi-cursors, Alt. We say on focus, outline none. So now if I focus on this user, on this input here, and if I hit tab, now I'm in the user. I hit tab, now I'm the password. If I hit tab, I'm in the login. You can't tell because the border's gone. Okay, now, are we going to keep it like this for the buttons? Absolutely not, because the buttons should have a focus. You should know that you're focused, except we're just not going to do that. At least not right now. We don't have a design yet, which is why I can't really say. But if Victoria says, hey, when when a button is focused, change the border color to be, I don't know, red or something. I don't know. But for now, we're just going to say outline none. Okay, cool. All right, now it's 7 o'clock. Now we got to fix another problem. Okay, what's the problem? Okay, your boss walks into the office. Your boss walks into the office. It's like, the design's beautiful and all, right? But the client just said they don't want green anymore. They want red, right? So imagine, right? Imagine you want to have absolutely not red. Okay, well, we'll go with like a purple color. Okay. Imagine, right? Imagine it's Friday, right? It's Friday. You know, you wanna go to the movies. You wanna go watch the new Avengers movie, or you just wanna go to the beach and hang out, or do whatever it is that you do on the weekends, right? Now imagine you don't want to work on the weekend. You're still gonna get paid overtime. Actually, no, we'll make it worse. Let's say you work for Tesla, right? Tesla doesn't pay overtime. All right, so more work for you. You're working at Tesla, and Elon Musk is like, nah, we don't want to use this color. We're gonna change it to like blue or purple, some color. You're like, shit, I don't even get paid overtime. Now I gotta spend my entire weekend changing all these colors because I did not think about the possibility that these colors here, these brown colors, could change at the client's whim. So now you're stuck going through every single line of code that you wrote. Now you gotta change these colors. So sucks for you, sucks to suck, right? Well, no, because we are not, we're not dumb. We are prepared. Boss says, hey, we want to change the color. No problem. You change the color right there. Bam, takes you like 2 seconds. You're going to look like a freaking genius. But you're not. You're just prepared, right? You got to be prepared for all these kinds of situations. Remember, when you were first taking your Java classes or whatever, I hope your professor told you, be aware of hard coding. Don't hard code values. You got to make things flexible. How the hell do we make it flexible with Tailwind, right? With these colors. How do we do that? How do we achieve that? Well, I'm going to show you. Okay. In fact, I'm going to show you my website. So go to pachecok.com. Here I have dark mode, right? So look at these colors, right? Here are these colors. Now check this out. I can go here, switch it to the light mode. Now it's blue. And now there's purple. Now we go to dark mode. Now we go light mode. We go purple. We go light. We go purple. I could add yellow. I can change whatever. Notice that these colors are changing so fast, right? How am I achieving this, right? So if your boss says, hey, we're going from purple to blue, cool. Now we're going from purple to blue, or blue to purple, whatever. It's like, no problem, boss. I got you. Whatever you want, boss. Whatever you want, but just don't take my weekend away, right? Right, look at that. I can even change complete layout, right? Like, as far as the colors are concerned. Now I have dark mode, right? Look at that. Shit, I could even do dark purple, so I can have purple, dark mode with purple accent or something. I don't know. The sky's the limit. Whatever you want to think about. So if you plan ahead, you can totally achieve that. You can have different themes if you wanted to. How sick is that? So how do we achieve that? Well, with Tailwind, it's pretty easy, okay? But this is not a Tailwind thing. This is a CSS thing, because we're first going to have to write some CSS code here. So this is part, I don't know if you saw the title of the video, of the stream. It's CSS Variables and Extending Tailwind. Okay, so let's start off with some CSS. So we only have one CSS file in this entire application, and that's index.css. And this index CSS is actually going to be generated using Tailwind. Okay, well, we can add extra styles in here if we needed to. Okay, now we need to add some extra CSS because we want to add something called CSS Variables. Okay, so how do we achieve this? You can put this anywhere you want, right? But it's best to define it at the very beginning here. And so yeah, so here we go. So how do you do this? Well, we want to create CSS variables. CSS variables are variables that can change. You can actually change it through JavaScript if you wanted to. Okay, you can change it through JavaScript. We're not going to be that fancy today. Okay, we're not going to be that fancy today. But we do need these CSS variables to live somewhere. Now, CSS variables exist depending on where you define them. So if I want these variables to exist at the entire application level, we have to define it using a special pseudo selector called root. So you do a colon and then root. So this means that I want to define the following styles at the root level. Okay. Now this is going to help us with our CSS variables. So how do you create a variable in CSS? Well, that's easy. All you have to do is use two hyphens, hyphen, hyphen. That's it. Now you can call it whatever you want. Now, how should you call, how should you label the colors? Like, how do you name them? Do you say purple? Do you say blue? No. No, you do not. Okay. So how should we label, our different colors that we're going to use in our application? I would suggest highly to read this following resource right here under the color palette creator. I believe it's here. They talk about how you should use colors. So applying color to a UI, I believe, is the one. No, not here. Where is it at? The color system. I think it's under the color system, but at the very, very top. Yeah. So I'm gonna link this, and I hope that you actually read this. Okay, read this. And there is a talk about this as well. I have to find it. It's Android Summit. Let's see. Theme. Yes, here it is. It's from a while ago, like 1 or 2 years ago, and this is coming basically from the beast's mouth, right? So this is what you want to be watching. So these are Android developers from Google on the Android team, and they're basically talking about like how you should use themes and stylings, developing your themes and styles. This is very much specific to Android and how Android styles things. However, I would very much recommend that you watch it anyway, even though this has, this talking about Android, but it's the way that they are using the verbiage, right? The lexicon on how they're naming their colors. What's the name of this? Is this the background? What about this? Right? How do you name these things to color them? that's what these talks talk about, and this is the part that I think is the most valuable. So I don't know how to share this. Do I right click here? Let me, I'll just open this up. That's hopefully that didn't blow up your ears. Here, let me paste this one. I would watch this one second, even though I'm going to link it first. I would watch it second. Oops, and I have, what did I type in? Android Summit theme. Here we go. So now we have this one. Share. I would watch this one first. Watch this one first. Please, please, please watch it. If you want to be a good designer, if you want to think smart about how you're building your applications beyond just the web, I would highly recommend you watch it. Okay? All right. So what I'm going to go over is basically like talking about what they've mentioned, and then also referring back to this article here, basically this blog post from, again, this is from material that's made by Google. So this is how Android apps are actually themed. So when it comes to colors, we have, we have a name for certain colors that come up a lot. Okay, for example, you have your primary color, right? Which could be like your brand color. Right, so if we were to go over here to, let's say, to the Android developer.android.com, right? Or not even this. Let's just go. What's a good example? So you can see the theme color in action. Well, they have some examples here. You want to look at, okay, what's the primary color that's being used here, right? So for a specific app. So if we scroll down here, there are some examples here. Like here's a perfect example. Here's a stock app, right? Or something. I don't know. What's the primary color here? Well, you can kind of, without even looking at this chart, you can kind of tell. It's like, well, it's some purple color, right? There's a purple color, right? The line charts have the same kind of purple color. The bar graphs have this purple color too. There seems to be this lighter variant purple color there. Stuff like that. You can totally tell, okay, well, the primary color there is purple, right? If you go on like Robinhood, what's the primary color there? It's green, right? You can see the green. Yeah, they're using a dark, the background's kind of dark and stuff, but like it's primarily green for money, right? That's their brand color. It's like that green color. So here's some examples here of some other apps. Here's the New York Times. They have light and dark themes. Like, okay, that's cool. Here's this app, Owl, that's like very colorful. And they have different primary colors depending on what screen you're in, right? So you can totally achieve stuff like that. Okay, look at this one, this photography app or whatever the heck this is, has this primary color of like this pink color on this screen. Okay, so you can change the colors depending where you're at. Okay. So the primary color is going to basically be the dominant color that you're going to see, like the most bright, the accent of the entire application. Okay, then you have a secondary color, something that complements it. Don't just pick a random color, Pick a color that is complementary, that can, fit well with that color. And then you have a color called background. So this is going to be the color that should be on the background. Now notice that the background color, we're not saying it's white. We're saying that the background color is background. Okay, we're not defining a specific hex color for it. This hex color, even though it's here, just serves as an example. Okay, this color could be different, right? Depending if you're like dark theme, light theme, purple, whatever, you can change this background color to fit that theme, that style. We have something called a surface. Okay, a surface. Now, what's the difference between a background and a surface? Well, we have an example of that. This area right here, we can refer to this area over here as the background color of our application. This is a surface. Now, if you read here, they actually kind of break down, they actually give some kind of definitions to certain things. So here's like their definition for a primary color. A primary color is the color displayed most frequently across the app's screens and components. Okay. A secondary color. A secondary color provides more ways to accent and distinguish your product. Having a secondary color is optional and should be applied sparingly to accent select parts of your UI, like switches and buttons. And then we have surface background and error colors. Okay, so surface colors affect surfaces of components such as cards, sheets, and menus. Okay. The background color appears behind scrollable content. This is the baseline background and surface color. In this case, it's just like FFF. So if you notice here, the background and surface color are both white. But how can you tell that these are cards? Because they have a shadow. Cards usually have shadows. We have a shadow. So what does this make it? A card. So what should be the background color name for this? It should be called a surface. This is a surface. This is a background. So here, let's start writing some of these color names. So first one's going to be primary. So what should be our primary color? What should be like a green color, right? That green color that we have. So there's also under resources, there is a color tool that we can use. I'm just using this just because, you know, I can pick a green color here real quick. You don't have to use it. You can use whatever color you want. But here, if I like that green color. I think that matches the theme that we have. So let me, I can't, here it is. So got it. So here's our, I think it's this one. Yeah. So here's the green I'm going to use. Okay. Here's the hex color. Again, you don't have to use this. I'm just using this just because. So now we have a green color. So now here, this CSS variable, you can give it whatever you want. You can give it a number. So that could be like, maybe we even define variables for like titles. What should be the height of the title? Instead of us hard coding it, how we did before with 3XL, we can actually say, hey, titles on cards should be this size. So it's the same across the entire application. So in case your boss says, hey, the title's too big on the cards, we need to change it, right? You can change it in one place instead of many different places. So here I'm going to give it this color. So the primary color is going to be that green color. And since we're in VS Code, we can actually click on this little thing here. You can actually change the color here if you want. Whatever, do whatever you want. Okay, so we'll use that green. Boom, done. So now we have a primary color. Okay, and again, you end it with a semicolon. So then here we can say, okay, now I want to define a background color. So we say background. And the background, by default, we actually have that color. If we go to our Figma, we click on the login part here, we actually already have some of these. So here's a background color. We click on edit, right click edit. Here's the background color. So we can just copy that. It's a hex color, so hex, boom, there he goes. There's our background color. And our surfaces, what should our surfaces be? So we want to have a surface color. So there's our surface. How do we, so what's the surface color that we used here? So you can click here, right click, edit style. And then I can't see. And this, it looks like it's just FFFFF, which is white, just pure white. Okay, so hex color, FFFF. Boom. There's my three colors here so far: primary, background, and surface. And that's it. Right? Again, if we look at this blog post here, there are many colors there are many variables you should use for your colors. Primary variance, like a slightly darker tone. Secondary variant. You have background, surface, error. On primary, we'll talk about these ones too. Okay, but for now, we're just going to define these ones. And then how much time do I have? Okay, I got 12 minutes. And then on Monday, we'll talk about the other colors that we need to do. Like, how do we define text colors, right? How do we define that? All right, so we're going to hit save here. Compiling. But now we need to change Tailwind. We need to tell Tailwind that these variables exist, and we want to use them on our colors for like text and stuff like that. So how do we do that? Well, now that we define our variables here, We just need to update Tailwind so we can use it. So how do we do that? So here we open up the Tailwind config.js file. We open that up here. And you see here where it says theme extend. We're going to expose this. We're going to open this up. Now we're going to expand the colors. Okay, so we say colors like this. And this is a JavaScript object. Okay. Whatever you put in here, okay, whatever you put in here is going to pop up whenever we deal with colors on text and on backgrounds. For example, I'll do something called tuna, and I'm going to have the color here be, you know, let's see, C4, C4, C4. I think it's like a gray color. Hit save. Okay, it's going to recompile. It's going to take a while because Tailwind has to be recompiled. So give it a second. Okay. Now, if I go here, right? Let's say I wanted to change the background color of my of this surface here. We're calling a surface now of this card. So I want to change it from BG white to tuna. Look, tuna pops up now. Look at that. That's not something that comes with Tailwind. I made that. I extended it. Now we have this thing called tuna. If I hit save, and it has my color there of C4, 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 now it's gray. Okay? You can make this whatever you want. I want these colors to reflect my variables. So again, in CSS variables, you need to have the hyphen hyphen. But here we can just say primary. Now, how do I get access to those variables? How do I do that? Well, the way you do it is you say var, okay, var, and then in parentheses, here in parentheses, you give it the name of the variable you want to grab. So that is dash dash primary. And we're going to do that for every single variable that we have. So here we can have, for example, we have background. Var dash dash background. That's the other variable that we have. And then we have one called surface. Surface. Var dash dash surface. Okay. And that's it. Now I'm going to prove, I'm not going to save this. I don't want to compile it yet. I'm going to prove to you that these don't exist yet. I'm going to sign up here. BG primary. P-R-M-A-R-Y. It doesn't, no suggestions. It doesn't exist. Okay, if I change the text color, say I want to change the text color. Hyphen. Primary. There is no primary. There is no background. Okay. There is no surface. These don't exist. It's like, what the heck are you talking about? Right? They don't exist. So let me save this config file and let it recompile. So now it's going to compile. It's going to take a little bit. It's got to recompile. And then they will exist. Okay, spoil alert. They will exist now. Check it out. So now here, the background for this card, remember, we're calling this a surface. Should be surface. There it is. Now it exists. Surface. I'm going to hit save. Now the surface color happens to be white. So you didn't see a change. However, let's say your boss says, hey, we want the surface colors to be, you know, something else. Like, let's go something crazy, like black for some reason. It's like, okay, sure, boss. Now all of the components that ever use the surface color will turn black. And now it's black. And I only had to change it in one location. Isn't that powerful? That is so powerful. If you don't see the benefits of doing this, I don't know what else to tell you, right? This is insane that we can do this. All right, so now I'm going to update the code that we have. So, for example, I don't want to see any colors here. These colors should not exist here. These are hard-coded. We don't want that. So the borders should be what? Primary. There you go. It's border primary. This green becomes primary. This one, primary. So the borders are now going to be colored primary color. whatever that is. Okay, notice that there's no colors here, right? We're not seeing any colors here. So let's change this one right here. So green 500, primary. Green 500 on the text is no longer going to be that. It's going to be primary. Background here, primary. Hit save. Okay, and there's still that green color, right? There's still a green color, but notice that here in our code, we're not defining any kind of like color, right? We're not defining a color. We're just saying, hey, oh, well, here we missed one. Okay, well, we'll talk about that one on Monday. This one is text white, right? We need to fix that. Okay. And this div right here, we had this special background color. It was this F1, F1. So we can actually take that. And the background here, it's F1, F1. So instead of doing inline styles like this, we don't have to do that anymore. We can just stick with Tailwind. We can say, hey, this background color, so BG is going to be background, that color, which happens to be that F1, F1, whatever. So it stays the same. But now these colors are completely dynamic. So dynamic, in fact, that we can actually change these variables using JavaScript. So we can actually change our CSS colors using JavaScript now if we wanted to. We've actually enabled that feature. That's just that it's a side effect of using CSS variables. That's pretty cool. You have more power there. Okay, so now let's fix the rest of the code here. So let's go to the login. We got to fix this now. So this div, we're no longer going to hard code the background color to this hex color. No more. We're going to use Tailwind now. And we have this super generic BG background. So now the background is going to be the color, that color. This is our surface, right? This is our container for the surface. And it was white, but we're no longer going to do that. Because this is a surface, we're going to use BG surface. This surface color is going to be the color for surfaces. What is that color? In this case, we just know it's this surface color, right? The surface variable. But this is going to depend based off of whatever we assign it. It could be white, it could be gray, it could be some other funky color, who knows? Now, I'm very lazy, right? I'm a coder, right? So I want to code things faster. Because remember, this is the weekend, right? You know, you want to have fun on the weekend. So how can I change all of these green 500s quickly? So I can just do a Control F, that's one way. You can also use Control D. So if I select all these green 500s, notice that there's like this slight color that gets highlighted all over the place. If I hit Control D and hit Control D, you notice that they're getting highlighted one at a time. D, D. I can actually change all these at the same time. Change these to primary. Hit save, done. So now I have all of this. Beautiful. Notice that now there are no hard-coded colors. Do you see any colors here? Well, except for that one, but we'll talk about that one on Monday. All right, so now the login is updated. The sign up is up. There's no colors here. Well, except for that one, but again, we'll talk about that on Monday. So check it out. Here's my sign up. Here's my green colors. I'm gonna go to app.js. I'm gonna remove the sign up component, bring back the login. I'm gonna hit save. There we go. Look at that. There's that same green color. Now, let's suppose your boss, again, it's the weekend, man. It's like 5 minutes before you're supposed to have the weekend. Your boss comes in and says, hey, we're changing the colors from that green to a purple color. All right, and they're like, ah, shit, right? It's like, it's the weekend, man. I wanted to have some fun today. You know, I'm gonna go watch a movie. I'm gonna go watch the Avengers. It's like, yeah, but we gotta get this done. It's like, all right, fine, whatever. Now it's no problem. Look, the log, I'm not even going to change any code. I'm just gonna change it here. Hit save. Now we have this purple. For some reason, the client wants purple now. Okay, cool. Well, there we go. I'm gonna change it purple here. Let it recompile. Now it's purple here. Right? There's a login. I didn't change any code. Did you see me touch any code? I didn't touch any code. I just updated it here. Look at it. Now it's purple. Now if I go back to the app.js and if I comment out login and I bring back sign up, hit save. Now we have sign up and it's purple. Do you guys not see this? Are you guys not seeing this? Like, this is insane. Look at the flexibility that we just enabled ourselves. That's insane. I think this is insane. I think it's really cool. So yeah, again, pick, change it, whatever. Boom, done. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Now, there are way more variables that we need to define. In fact, I'll actually show you how I did it from my website. These are the CSS variables that I've used. So we have primary, primary variant, primary light, dark, secondary, all these, background, surface, surface hero, error, success, warnings, and then we have these on ones. We're going to talk about this on Monday. So on primary, on secondary, on background, what the heck are all these? Well, I'm going to show you on Monday, and you'll see what this does and why I keep referring to that. We still have some hard-coded color definitions, specifically on the buttons. We have the white. We need to fix that. So we'll be fixing that on Monday. Okay. All right. So it's 7:30 now. I don't want to take up too much, you guys. It's time. It's the weekend. Go have some fun. Maybe, I don't know, maybe practice a little bit. That'd probably be good too. But yeah, so there we go. So far, this is what we have. We have sign up for Bidder, which is our fake social media service. And so we have the sign up page, and then we also have a working well, not a working login page, but we have a login page. And there you go. Beautiful. All right. So with that, I will end it here. If anybody has any questions, I'll hang out for a little bit. If not, you're free to go. So yeah, I'll give you guys like a couple minutes to ask any questions. Do you have any questions? If not, I will end it here. No questions? None? Zero? Nada? Questions, comments, concerns? Nothing? All right. Then I guess the only assignment I would say is watch those videos that I linked. I've watched them. I've probably watched each one of them at least 3 times, and they're an hour long. So I probably that's two of them. That's like 6 hours I've at least invested in just trying to understand it. It's pretty gnarly. Like once you get it, like the flexibility you just get is just so immense. Again, this part that I just showed you has absolutely nothing to do with Tailwind, except that we can extend Tailwind to also reflect the CSS variables. So if you were using something like, oh, I don't know, Sass or something like that, or Bootstrap, you could probably do it there too as well, right? This is not anything, what I've just shown you is nothing very specific to Tailwind except for the configuration part, right? The extension, that's it. And notice that I didn't even talk about React. This has absolutely nothing to do with React. This is just how we're using Tailwind. So you could use this, you can use Tailwind in Angular, or you can use it in Vue, or you can use it in just vanilla HTML and CSS stuff, and JavaScript, right? You don't need to use these libraries. You can totally use it wherever you want, right? You can use it with, whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Okay, this is more of a CSS thing. It's pretty advanced, and it's pretty sick. So anyways, since nobody has any questions, then I will leave it here, and I'll see you guys on Monday. All right, have a good weekend, everybody. Bye.